The night air in Cumberland County was heavy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Moonlight barely touched the ground beneath the towering live oaks, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets long kept. Catherine Kellerman pressed herself against the rough bark, her dress torn from the underbrush, and watched the barn from a distance. Inside, she knew, horrors unseen by polite society were being enacted. Her mother, Lucinda Kellerman, stood within that barn as if it were a cathedral, performing her grotesque rituals of treatment on the young women who had been entrusted to her care. These girls, Rebecca Cartwright, Emma Singleton, Sarah Witfield, and others, had begun their sessions full of hope, seeking refinement and perfection. But the barns had become tombs. Catherine's stomach turned as the implications settled over her like a shroud. "That kind of look," she whispered to Daniel. "It means only one thing." Daniel met her gaze, grim and unwavering. "I've seen 3 barns that have been emptied and cleaned. Cartwright, Singleton, Witfield. All of them started after your mother visited. All ended the same way." Catherine felt bile rise in her throat. Her mother's experiments were not just cruel, they were lethal. And worse, the families, desperate to correct their daughter's flaws, had been complicit in the deaths. Rage and grief tangled inside her. "How many others?" Catherine asked, voice barely a whisper. "I do not know for certain," Daniel admitted. Catherine clenched her fists, the edges of her nails biting into her palms. "We cannot just save ourselves," she said. "We have to expose this everything. The treatments, the deaths, all of it." Joshua shook his head, pained. "If we try to expose this before we are safe, we will die before anyone listens. We survive first, then justice comes. Only then." Catherine knew he was right, but knowing that others might be suffering even as they fled made her feel complicit in the very evil she sought to destroy. They gathered what they could: meager supplies, the documents, remaining money, knives, and a small amount of food. Catherine took one last item: the letter she had written to her mother. She would not send it, but she would keep it, a record of everything Lucinda had done. The goodbye to Daniel was brief. Anything longer would break them. Catherine embraced him, holding tight the child who had sacrificed himself for their escape. "I will come back for you," she promised. "When we are safe, when we have the power to act, I will come back. You will not be forgotten." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Then they slipped into the darkness, vanishing into a grove of live oaks that had hidden so many of the barn's secrets. The walk to Natchez took 4 hours, not 3. They moved slowly, halting frequently to listen for patrols or travelers. The night was moonless, concealing them but making each step treacherous. Catherine, unaccustomed to long walks, struggled to keep pace, but fear and determination pushed her onward. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of Natchez. Workers moved toward the docks. Shopkeepers opened their stores. Catherine used precious water to clean her face and hands, trying to pass as a respectable widow rather than a fugitive who had crawled through the woods all night. The steamboat office occupied a prominent spot along the waterfront, its windows already glowing with lamplight. Inside, a clerk reviewed manifests and passenger lists. His eyes widened slightly as he saw Catherine with 3 enslaved men. "Good morning, madam," he said, voice carefully neutral. "How may I assist you?" Catherine steadied herself. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times. "I require passage to Louisville on your earliest departure," she said, placing the 4 documents on the desk. "My servants and I have had a difficult journey, and I wish to complete our travels with all possible speed." The clerk examined the papers meticulously. Catherine's heart hammered. Behind her, Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel bowed their heads, playing their roles perfectly. "The Morning Star departs at 8 o'clock. The clerk said finally, "I can arrange a private cabin for you, madam, and quarters for your property in the cargo hold." "That will be acceptable," Catherine replied, counting out the money. She forced herself to watch the clerk remain neutral as he processed the transaction. "Welcome aboard the Morning Star, Mrs. Kellerman," he said, handing her the tickets. "May your journey be peaceful." For a brief moment, Catherine allowed herself hope. In less than 3 hours, they would be on a steamboat heading north, away from Mississippi, away from Lucinda, away from a barn and everything it represented. But hope is a fragile thing. As they moved toward the gangplank, Samuel whispered, "Miss Catherine, we are being watched." Her gaze followed his. A man near the warehouse, dressed as a river worker, watched them too intently. His posture was too rigid, too focused. "Slave catcher," Joshua breathed. He recognized something. "We must board immediately." They hurried, drawing attention. Workers paused a glance at the unusual party. The captain stood at the top of the gangplank, checking tickets. "Mrs. Kellerman," he said, scrutinizing her ticket. "Traveling alone with 3 male servants?" "My husband recently passed," Catherine said steadily. "I am returning to family in Kentucky. These men are being transported to settle debts." The captain studied them and, perhaps bored or practical, nodded. "We depart in 1 hour." They climbed aboard. Catherine did not look back at Natchez until they reached the deck. When she did, her blood ran cold. The man watching them spoke urgently to 2 others. One mounted on horseback turned and galloped toward the road that led to Plantations. "They are going to alert my mother," Catherine whispered. "We have 1 hour before she arrives with proof that I am not a widow, that these papers are forged, that we are fugitives." Joshua's jaw tightened. "Then we pray the captain values his schedule more than he values helping a plantation mistress." Catherine was led to her cabin, small but clean. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel went to the cargo hold, lingering near her cabin longer than protocol would normally allow. "Something is wrong," Samuel whispered. "The crew knows. I can see it in their eyes." Time crawled. Catherine watched cargo being loaded, passengers boarding, sun rising. Every minute drew them closer to departure and discovery. At 7:30, a commotion on the dock drew her attention. Lucinda had arrived. She was not alone. Behind her were 3 men on horseback, including the county sheriff and armed plantation workers. Lucinda descended from her carriage, her face a mask of cold fury. She approached the captain, imperious and demanding. The captain shook his head. Lucinda's voice rose across the water. "That girl is my daughter, and these men are stolen property." The door to Catherine's cabin burst open. Lucinda stood framed in the doorway. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel held at gunpoint by the sheriff's men. "Did you truly believe you could escape?" Lucinda asked, her voice quiet but more terrifying than a scream. Catherine, for the first time in her life, felt no fear, only rage. "I found Father's will. I know what you did. You stole the plantation. You forged documents. You built your empire on lies and murder." Lucinda's expression did not change. "Your father was weak. I did what was necessary. You killed those girls." Catherine's voice cracked. "Rebecca, Emma, Sarah, how many others? How many daughters died in those barns while you documented their suffering like insects?" For the first time, something flickered in Lucinda's eyes. Not remorse, but recognition. Some subjects lacked a constitution to survive it. Their families understood. They were grateful for my discretion. Catherine realized then. Her mother was beyond human cruelty, a void wrapped in silk. The cabin door slammed behind them, the echo lingering like a heartbeat in the heavy air. Catherine stood, her chest tight, hands trembling from adrenaline and fear. Her mother, Lucinda Kellerman, loomed over them, a figure of cold elegance and ruthless authority. The sheriff's men held Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel at gunpoint, their rifles steady, unflinching. "Did you truly think you could escape?" "Me?" Lucinda's voice was calm, deliberate, but beneath the control there was an edge of menace that made Catherine shiver. "Did you believe I would not know?" Catherine squared her shoulders, fury coiling like a serpent inside her. "I found Father's will," she said, voice steady despite the fear threatening to choke her. "I know what you've done. You stole the plantation. You forged documents. You built your empire on lies, on murder." Lucinda's eyes flickered for a brief moment, a glimmer of recognition, but her expression remained impassive. "Your father was a weak man. He would have destroyed everything we built. I did what was necessary. You killed those girls." Catherine shouted, "Rebecca, Emma, Sarah, how many others? How many daughters died in those barns while you documented their suffering like insects?" A pause. Catherine's voice hung in the room, trembling but defiant. And then Lucinda spoke, almost quietly, almost too calm. Not remorse, recognition. Some subjects simply lacked a constitution to survive. Their families understood. They were grateful for my discretion in disposing of the evidence. Catherine felt bile rise, but she held her ground. Her mother was not merely cruel. She was monstrous, a void clothed in silk and social standing. "You will return with me," Lucinda continued, her tone slicing through the tension. "These men will be hanged for theft and assault. The documents you stole will be burned, and you, dear daughter, will complete your treatment because you carry evidence of your shame in your very body." Catherine's eyes widened in horror. Lucinda had somehow discovered her pregnancy. "Dr. Harrison examined your room this morning," she said, reading Catherine's face. "He confirmed my suspicions. So you see, your situation is far worse than mere disobedience." Joshua lunged forward, but a rifle cracked against his shoulder, sending him to his knees, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. "Stop!" Catherine screamed, heart pounding. "I will go with you. Just do not hurt them." "Oh, they will be hurt," Lucinda said, smiling faintly. "But first, they will tell me who else knows about your father's will. Who else has seen the documents?" Samuel, his voice clear despite fear, answered, "Many people know. I sent a letter north to abolitionist contacts in Pennsylvania. Weeks ago. It tells everything about the barns, the missing girls, all of it." Lucinda's certainty wavered for a fraction of a second, the first crack in her cold facade. "You are illiterate slaves," she said. "You could not have done such a thing." "I can read and write better than most white men in this county," Samuel said, unwavering. "And I spent 3 weeks copying every document in your office while you planned your empire of torture. Every forgery, every false death certificate, every letter arranging disposal of bodies. It is all documented, all sent north, all waiting to be published." Catherine watched her mother's expression shift, calculation replacing certainty. Lucinda was weighing consequences beyond her immediate control. Murder could be concealed in Mississippi among cooperative elites, but not if northern newspapers began asking questions. "Prove it," Lucinda demanded, her voice sharp. "Show me evidence these documents were sent." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "The proof will arrive when the investigators do. Perhaps in days, perhaps weeks, but it will come." The sheriff stepped forward, troubled. "Mrs. Kellerman, if there is evidence of wrongdoing, if documents exist, then there are no documents." Lucinda snapped. "This slave is lying to save his life." Catherine saw the calculation in her mother's eyes. Lucinda weighed the risk, the possibility that even a fragment of Samuel's claim was true. Exposure would destroy not only her reputation, but her freedom. Lucinda's voice softened for the first time, just slightly. "Sheriff, take them into custody. Lock them in the county jail until we can sort this matter properly. If documents exist, we will find them. If they do not, these men will hang for their lives." Catherine's heart sank as they were led away. She caught Joshua's eye in one fleeting glance. Goodbye. The county jail meant torture. It meant death, quick or slow, depending entirely on Lucinda's whim. Yet inside Catherine, a spark of determination remained. She was 19, pregnant, imprisoned by her own mother, but she had chosen. She had fought for freedom, witnessed courage, and, in that small flicker of resistance, she was not broken. 3 days passed in darkness and silence. Guards answered no questions. Food came once daily, just enough to sustain life. The world outside seemed distant, unreal. On the 4th day, Daniel appeared at her window. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he was alive. "Miss Catherine," he whispered urgently, "listen carefully. We do not have much time." Catherine gripped the bars. "Where are Joshua and Samuel?" Daniel's expression said it all. Joshua had been taken 2 nights ago. Samuel was alive, barely, but before the guards could hurt him too badly, he had done something. He had sent a letter north, one letter to an abolitionist contact in Pennsylvania, telling everything, the barns, the missing girls, all of it. Catherine's heart surged with hope. Will they come? Will anyone believe him? "I do not know," Daniel admitted. But you need to survive until they do. Whatever your mother plans, you must endure it. You are the only witness who cannot be dismissed as a lying slave. You are the only hope for justice. Her survival was no longer about herself. It was about Rebecca, Emma, Sarah, and all the others. It was about exposing Lucinda's network of cruelty. "How do I survive?" she asked, voice trembling. "Agree to everything," Daniel said. "Tell her you are broken. Make her believe she has won. Wait. When the opportunity comes, act." That evening, Lucinda visited. Catherine performed perfectly, real tears streaming, begging forgiveness, promising obedience. Lucinda, satisfied, arranged for Catherine's return to the estate. Not to the barn, but to a locked room where Dr. Harrison could attend her pregnancy discreetly. Weeks passed. Catherine endured isolation, fear, minimal food. Dr. Harrison visited with cold clinicality. Catherine understood. She would carry to term, then the child would be taken, and she would be told it was a stillbirth. But even in captivity, Catherine's mind remained free. She planned. She remembered every detail, every injustice. She waited, and the hour of reckoning was coming. The carriage rattled over the uneven streets of Natchez as Catherine sat with her hands clenched in her lap, the fabric of her skirts twisting under her grip. Her mother rode beside her, silent, eyes fixed forward with an expression of cold calculation. But Catherine no longer flinched. Every step she had taken since the barn, every sacrifice, had steeled her. She carried not just herself, but the weight of 7 lives lost and the knowledge of the cruelty her mother had woven into the very fabric of the county. The courthouse loomed ahead, a solid brick structure crowned with iron railings. Investigators from the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society awaited, men of authority and intent, carrying the weight of Northern scrutiny into the heart of the Deep South. Catherine could sense their presence before she saw them, the energy of purpose, the quiet determination that had been absent from Mississippi for far too long. Mrs. Kellerman, a tall man in a dark coat, stepped forward, bowing slightly. "We are here regarding a letter sent weeks ago. Your cooperation is appreciated." Catherine met his gaze, her voice firm despite the flutter in her chest. "I am Catherine Kellerman, and I have much to tell you." Her mother's lips twitched, the first sign of unease. Lucinda's eyes, sharp and cold, scanned the room as though she could dismantle every word before it was spoken. But she had underestimated her daughter's resolve. Catherine began to speak, recounting the barns, the girls, the treatments, the lies, and the deaths. Her voice never wavered, even as the memories clawed at her, as the names of Rebecca Cartwright, Emma Singleton, and Sarah Witfield spilled from her lips. She described her father's hidden will, the forged documents, and the system of cruelty that had been disguised as propriety. Hours passed, the air thick with the tension of truth confronting power. The investigators took meticulous notes, their pens scratching a record of horrors that had been hidden for over a decade. They questioned her, carefully probing for inconsistencies. But Catherine's answers were precise, honed by every moment of fear and courage since the night she had fled the barn. Samuel, barely recovered from his injuries, was brought forward. His testimony corroborated Catherine's story, detailing the letters, the copied documents, and the Northern contact prepared to publish the evidence. Daniel, too, testified, recounting the nights they had spent gathering proof and the sacrifices made to ensure the truth would survive. Lucinda remained seated, her hands folded, listening. The initial mask of confidence cracked slightly each time a witness spoke. The realization that the world beyond Mississippi might know the truth unsettled her, though she maintained her composure outwardly. The man was killed without trial, one investigator remarked, eyes narrowing at the mention of Joshua. Catherine's voice did not falter. "My mother ordered it. He was executed for his courage and for protecting me." A murmur ran through the room. The cruelty was undeniable, the evidence mounting like a tidal wave. Lucinda's lawyer whispered rapidly, but her mother's eyes betrayed a flash of fear. Exposure was no longer a threat of whispers. It was imminent, documented in letters, testimonies, and undeniable facts. When the hearing concluded for the day, Catherine felt an exhaustive relief, though her body ached from hunger and stress, and though she carried the child of the man who had given her strength and love. A seed of hope had been planted. The truth was no longer a secret buried in barns. It had wings, carried by those who would not allow injustice to remain hidden. That night, as Catherine lay in a modest room provided by the investigators, she allowed herself a quiet moment. She thought of Joshua, of Samuel, of Daniel, and of the 7 girls whose lives had been stolen. She whispered each of their names, committing them to memory, committing herself to justice. The fight was far from over, but the first victory had been won. The walls of secrecy around Lucinda's empire of cruelty were cracking, and with each fragment of evidence revealed, the power of truth grew stronger. The courthouse in Natchez had never seen a day like this. Word had spread that Catherine Kellerman would testify, and a crowd pressed against the doors, curious, horrified, and eager for justice. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Lucinda Kellerman sat in the defendant's chair, her posture rigid, her expression a mask of composed fury. But Catherine could see the tremor in her hand as she clutched the armrest. The world was finally watching, and for the first time, her mother was uncertain. Catherine's voice rang out clearly when she took the stand. She described the barns, the treatments, the disappearances, the forged documents, and the complicity of the families who had consented to their daughters' deaths in the name of social perfection. She named each girl, recounting their fates with precision and care: Rebecca Cartwright, Emma Singleton, Sarah Witfield, Abigail Henderson, Margaret Ashworth, Virginia Thorne, and Ella Lenina Pute. The room was silent, the gravity of her words settling over everyone like a pall. Samuel, supported by Daniel, followed. Despite his injuries, he recounted how he had copied documents, sent letters north, and risked his life to ensure the truth survived. Daniel corroborated every detail, emphasizing the system of cruelty Lucinda had orchestrated and the lives destroyed for vanity and control. Lucinda's confident facade cracked further with every testimony. The lawyers attempted to intimidate witnesses, but Catherine and her allies held firm. Evidence of the forgeries, letters, and meticulously kept records of the treatments left no room for doubt. When the investigators presented the copies of Samuel's letters to abolitionists and the northern newspapers, the tide turned irreversibly. The mention of Joshua's execution caused collective gasp. Catherine's heart ached, but her resolve hardened. She had loved him, and his courage had given her strength. She had promised herself that his death would not be in vain. The trial stretched over days, each session peeling back layers of Lucinda's empire of cruelty. Plantation families, previously complicit or silent, were confronted with the truth. Some fled the state. Others attempted to discredit the evidence. But the meticulous records, eyewitness testimonies, and northern letters left them no escape. When the verdict came in January 1844, it was decisive. Lucinda Kellerman was convicted of multiple murders, forgery, and theft. The sentence was life imprisonment. The public murmured as the news spread through Natchez, a mixture of shock and relief. For the first time, power had been held accountable, and cruelty could not hide behind wealth and status. Catherine returned home to her estate in February 1844, still carrying her pregnancy. She gave birth to a son, Thomas Joshua, named in honor of both her father and the man who had shown her true courage. Using her father's legitimate will, she inherited the Kellerman plantation and began the difficult, revolutionary process of manumission, freeing every enslaved person who had been forced to labor there. Samuel survived his injuries and stayed on as a paid worker, helping Catherine manage the estate. Daniel pursued his education, finally able to live beyond the constraints that had bound him as a child. The barn where Catherine had been imprisoned was torn down, and in its foundations were found the remains of 7 girls, buried in shallow graves. Catherine arranged proper burials for each, ensuring their stories were told, their names honored. The horrors of Lucinda's treatment were not forgotten, but justice had begun to heal the wounds that Catherine's plantation became a symbol of a new future, one where courage, truth, and compassion replaced cruelty and oppression. The legacy of the barn, of her mother's obsession, and of the vanished girls remained as a solemn reminder. Human obsession and the devaluation of life can create horrors worse than any nightmare. But courage, resilience, and truth can illuminate even the darkest corners. The years that followed were a testament to Catherine Kellerman's resilience. The plantation, once a site of horror and secrecy, had transformed into a place of hope and redemption. Catherine raised her son, Thomas Joshua, instilling in him lessons of justice, compassion, and courage. The horrors of the past remained a shadow, but she refused to let them define her future. Samuel, healed but scarred, became an advisor and trusted friend, his knowledge and experience guiding the rebuilding of the estate. Daniel pursued his education with fervor and eventually became a teacher, dedicating his life to ensuring that the knowledge and opportunities he had once been denied were accessible to others. Together, they created a community rooted in fairness, compassion, and opportunity, a stark contrast of cruelty that had once dominated the land. The memory of the 7 girls, the ones who had suffered and died in the barns, was honored through proper graves and memorials. Catherine made sure their stories were told, their names never forgotten. Rebecca Cartwright, Emma Singleton, Sarah Whitfield, Abigail Henderson, Margaret Ashworth, Virginia Thorne, and Ella Lenina Pute. Their lives, though stolen, became the impetus for change, a reminder of the price of silence and complicity. Lucinda Kellerman's influence faded with her imprisonment and subsequent death in 1846. Her empire of control and fear dissolved, leaving only whispers of her cruelty in the corridors of the old estate. The families who had been complicit faced their own reckonings, some publicly, others privately, but none could erase the truths Catherine had revealed. Catherine never forgot Joshua, whose love had given her strength in the darkest hours. She named her son in his honor, carrying forward a legacy of courage and integrity. Every decision she made, every reform she implemented, was shaped by the sacrifices of those who had suffered under her mother's hand. The barn was gone, but the lessons remained. Catherine's plantation operated without enslaved labor, a radical vision realized in a state steeped in oppression. Freedom, education, and dignity became the cornerstones of a new society on the land her father had once owned, now restored not just legally but morally. In her later years, Catherine often walked through the fields where the barns once stood. She reflected on the human capacity for cruelty, for obsession, and the fragility of innocence. But she also recognized the strength that truth, courage, and compassion could inspire. The past had been dark, but through her actions, the horrors were illuminated and remembered, not to punish the future, but to guide it. Her story and those of the girls who had been silenced became a legacy, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, human courage can confront cruelty and justice, however delayed can prevail. The world changed, and Catherine Kellerman had ensured it was changed for the better. The shadows of the past remained, but in the light of her choices, they could no longer harm. The world changed, and Catherine Kellerman had ensured it was changed for the better. The shadows of the past remained, but in the light of her choices, they could no longer harm. If you found this story gripping and chilling, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, The Fear Ledger, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next historical horror tale. Share it with someone who loves dark mysteries, and leave a comment below. What part of Catherine's journey shocked you the most? The past holds many secrets, and some are darker than we dare imagine. See you in the next video.